In the dim glow of a medieval workshop, the steady rhythm of wooden mallets striking iron hoops echoed against rough timber walls. The scent of resin and oak shavings lingered in the air. There were no roaring machines, no saw blades or hydraulic presses, and yet the coopers, those skilled barrel makers, produced vessels so precise and watertight that they could hold ale, wine, salted fish, or grain for months, even years. Their craft was more than trade. It was the quiet heartbeat of survival. How, without modern tools, did they achieve what seems almost miraculous? They shaped staves, the curved planks that form the body of the barrel, using nothing but axes, draw knives, and planes. With controlled fire and careful sprinkling of water, they coaxed stiff oak into elegant curves, binding everything with iron hoops. Each barrel was not only functional, but essential to the lifeblood of a medieval society. Across Europe, barrels became far more than simple containers. They were the invisible infrastructure of commerce, the very backbone of trade. While clay jars broke and baskets leaked, barrels offered durability, portability, and the rare gift of holding liquid without seepage. In their curved walls, merchants carried precious cargo: Bordeaux wines bound for royal feasts, salted herring destined for Lenten tables, or sacks of grain waiting out a harsh winter. For sailors, barrels were as crucial as sails themselves. They carried fresh water across oceans, keeping men alive on voyages that stretched into months. Their design was revolutionary. Round yet sturdy, a barrel could be rolled by one man across stone streets or onto ships, moving heavy loads that would have otherwise required teams of labourers. They lined storerooms in villages, filled taverns, and guarded provisions in monasteries. A well-sealed barrel meant the difference between hunger and survival during failed harvest or bitter winters. In short, these vessels became lifelines of both households and empires. The cooper, then, was far more than a craftsman. He was an architect of daily survival, his work ensuring that food did not spoil and that goods reached distant markets. Though his name rarely appears in chronicles, the cooper's influence was profound, linking remote towns with great ports and provisioning armies that marched across Europe. Workshops were noisy, pungent places. Oak staves stood propped against walls, iron hoops lay stacked in corners, and the rhythmic thud of mallets was ever present. Apprentices learned under stern masters, enduring years of training before they could be trusted with their own barrels. The guild system recognised their trade as essential, protecting their craft and granting them status. Theirs was a laborious profession, precise, demanding, and unrelenting, yet the rewards were respect and the knowledge that their hands sustained both local families and kingdoms alike. The first stage in crafting a barrel began not in the workshop but in the forest. The choice of wood determined everything. Coopers understood intimately which species offered strength, flexibility, and tight grain. Oak was the gold standard. Its dense fibres swelled upon contact with liquid, sealing gaps naturally. But it was not simply cut and used. Logs were split, not sawn, to preserve the integrity of the grain, then seasoned outdoors for months, sometimes years. Sun, wind, and rain leached out harsh tannins that could spoil contents, while also drying the wood to prevent warping. To the cooper's eye, a log was more than timber. It was a partner in creation. He read the grain like a script, rejecting flawed pieces and setting aside those that carried hidden cracks. Each region had its preferences: pine or fir for dry goods, chestnut in southern climates, but for wine, ale, and water, oak reigned supreme. Without this careful selection, an entire barrel and its precious cargo could be lost. Once seasoned timber was ready, rough logs were shaped into staves. The cooper split the wood into long boards, each shaved with axes and draw knives. These staves were not flat. The edges tapered slightly so that, when joined together, they formed a circle. This bulging profile, narrow at the ends, wide at the belly, was achieved by eye and hand, not measurement. It required immense precision. Shave too thin, and the stave might crack under pressure. Leave it too thick, and the pieces would not fit snugly. Each stave was unique, yet all had to marry perfectly, forming a tight embrace that defined the barrel's strength. Dozens of these were arranged in a circle, standing upright like soldiers in formation. Temporary hoops of rope or scrap wood held them in place as the cooper's mallet coaxed them into alignment. At this stage, the barrel looked skeletal, full of gaps, but the essential geometry was already there, waiting for the elements of fire and water to bring it alive. Imagine a world where no power saw's word, no electric drills pierced the silence, and no laser levels cast their beams. Yet in that world, bridges of timber spanned wide rivers, halls of wood rose proudly in bustling towns, and castles framed with beams endured the passing of centuries. How did men, armed only with axes, ropes, and chisels, bring forth such marvels? The answer rested not merely in strength, but in a legacy of wisdom, small tricks, and a patient intimacy with wood. A tradition carried hand to hand, generation to generation, until it formed the backbone of Europe's landscapes. In medieval life, carpenters walked a narrow road between the ordinary and the sacred. They were not lords, priests, or soldiers, yet their labour shaped every layer of society. From the simplest peasant cottage to the soaring market hall, from the farmer's plough to the cathedral spire, wood whispered under their tools. Their touch gave villages roofs to shield against the rain, carts to carry harvests, doors that closed against winter winds, and scaffolds that bore the weight of churches climbing toward heaven. Carpenters did not leave behind chronicles, yet their mark was pressed into the daily breath of every community. Stone may endure, but wood lived. It bent in storms, swelled with rain, cracked in heat, and carried the breath of seasons. To master such a material demanded more than muscle. It required judgment, the wisdom to know when a log could hold the strain of a bridge or when it would betray its burden with a hidden flaw. Thus, the carpenter became more than a worker. He was a guardian of trust. The rhythm of his work echoed across towns and villages. Axes rang against trunks, mallets thudded into chisels, the air filled with resin, sap, and sawdust. Villagers gathered to watch beams raised or scaffolds tied, for carpenters worked openly, in fields, in streets, in the heart of construction. Their efforts were visible, noisy, communal, and essential. The toolbox of a carpenter might seem poor to modern eyes, yet within it lay the power to transform forests into marvels. The axe was king, able to fell, split, shape, and smooth. Saws of iron, their teeth sharpened on stone, groaned patiently through logs. Chisels, polished keen, carved mortises with care. A mallet of wood, humble in form, carried blows that set beams in place. For measuring, cords of linen or leather stood in for tapes, stretched tight across foundations. Compasses carved from wood or forged in iron, traced arcs for arches and wheel hubs. Straight edges of timber guided cuts. The plumb line, a stone or weight dangling from a string, held truth, ensuring posts rose straight and walls stood without tilt. With such tools, heavy, simple, and built to endure, carpenters found no lack. They held few instruments, but each was a trusted companion, known in hand and memory. The work was slow, yet the slowness bred mastery. Each board smoothed by hand carried the memory of effort. Each joint shaped with patience bore the trace of thought. A carpenter knew his wood not as material alone, but as something living. The sound of the axe against grain told him its secret. The smell of the resin spoke of its strength. Through such intimacy, he learned not only to build, but to listen. Ropes tied with knots became measuring lines. A snapped cord, dusted in chalk, left a clean mark straight as a beam of light. Wooden compasses carried arcs faithfully, their symmetry ensuring curves met as they should. Gravity itself was conscripted, a plumb line's patient pull more trustworthy than any guess. Tricks like these, born of necessity, became quiet wonders. Where machines complicate, medieval carpenters relied on simplicity stretched to perfection. Most extraordinary of all was joinery. Without screws or nails, frames endured storms and centuries. The mortise and tenon, tongue cut for hollow, locked beam into beam. Driven home and secured with wooden pegs, these joints grew stronger with time, flexing with seasons instead of breaking. Dovetail joints, carved into wedge shapes, bound chests and doors so tightly that their beauty was also their strength. Each required a hand steady, patient, practiced. By lamplight in sawdust-strewn workshops, carpenters shaped these invisible marvels. To the passerby, the beams of a hall seemed to float. Only the craftsmen knew the secret tongues and slots that bound them. Wood was chosen with care, for trees were not all alike. Oak, slow in growth and rich in strength, bore the weight of castles and bridges. Ash, supple and springing, bent without snapping, perfect for wheels and arches. Pine and fir, lighter and straight-grained, climbed high in roofs. Alder or poplar, softer to carve, graced interiors. Even the time of felling mattered. Trees cut in winter when sap retreated warped less. Logs lay seasoning for months or years, stacked where air could dry them. In these choices, carpenters lived in rhythm with the forest itself. Yet cutting was only the first trial. The weight of timber mocked men without machines. Here too invention prevailed. Logs rolled over branches turned the earth into a moving floor. Oxen strained at ropes, men heaved alongside inch by inch. On mud or snow, sledges dragged beams like ships on land. Rivers bore rafts of timber downstream, drifting days toward towns. At the sight, ramps and pulleys bent strength to advantage. Poles pried, inclined planes guided beams. Wooden wheels with men walking inside hoisted stones and timbers skyward. All was done together. Villagers, animals, rivers, gravity. Each a silent partner in the rise of hall, bridge or spire. When cathedrals climbed, it was carpenters who built the scaffolds, lattices of wood lashed together, rising step by step to hold the masons. When castles prepared for war, carpenters set gates, hoardings and drawbridges in place, wood becoming both shield and weapon. Bridges rooted in riverbeds, bound by braces, endured storms. Without these works of timber, the stone above would never have stood. And always small tricks preserved the work. Saw teeth rubbed with wax slid smooth. Planks buried in damp soil dried slowly, resisting cracks. Logs soaked in rivers shed sap and grew strong. A tap on wood told whether rot hid within. A stroke of hand across grain warned where a split might run. Such knowledge, carried in hand and ear, was unwritten yet vital. These humble gestures, unseen, made the difference between ruin and endurance. The journey of a carpenter began not with mastery but with obedience. Apprentices, often scarcely beyond childhood, entered the service of a master. They swept, sharpened, carried, and fetched. These humble tasks were lessons in disguise, patience, rhythm, and discipline. To watch the master's hands was to read a book written in wood and steel. Years passed in service, 7 or more, before trust grew. The journeyman stage followed. With a small chest of tools, he wandered from town to town, earning wages and experience. Journeymen saw the variety of Europe's buildings, the market halls of Flanders, the bridges of the Rhine, the churches of Normandy. Each project honed his hand. Yet only when he returned with a masterpiece, a work judged by his peers, could he claim the title of master carpenter. Then he gained the right to teach, to train apprentices, to join the guild that guarded secrets and preserved traditions. Guilds wove carpentry into the fabric of society. They set standards, defended wages, and preserved honour. They ensured outsiders did not claim the craft. In this way, knowledge passed forward not by parchment, but by calloused hands, discipline, and loyalty. Carpenters became part of a lineage, not just builders, but guardians of memory. The results of their work still stand. In Normandy, timber-framed houses lean, gently yet remain sound after 600 years. In England, Westminster Hall's vast oak roof still spans without falter. In German towns, bridges first laid by carpenters remain the bones of roads. These are not accidents of survival, but triumphs of understanding. Without nails that rust, without machines that fail, joinery endured. Where stone is celebrated, wood endures quietly, its genius half hidden. The beauty of these structures lies not only in their survival, but in what they reveal. They remind us that medieval carpenters, with little more than rope, axe, and chisel, raised marvels still admired by engineers today. The strength of their work was not merely in timber, but in the philosophy behind it. Patience, respect for nature, and knowledge drawn from observation. Think of a carpenter in a half-timbered hall. His beams rise above, crossed and joined, invisible joints holding against centuries of storms. He is long forgotten, his name unrecorded, his hands dust. Yet his work lives, a silent companion to lives carried on within. The creak of wooden floors in European villages still carries his ghost. Each bridge crossed by merchants centuries ago bore the weight of countless lives. Each scaffold that rose beneath a cathedral spire was his design. In war, when fire or siege broke stone, carpenters rebuilt first, for timber was the quickest to return. Their legacy is not only in wood, but in wisdom. They showed that strength lies in harmony with nature, not conquest of it. They taught that knowledge comes through patient trial, not invention alone. They proved that even without the machines of industry, human hands guided by tradition could rival eternity. Even now, engineers study medieval joints. Architects marvel at beams unbowed after centuries. Restorers lean close, tracing marks of axes, reading lines of chalk preserved faintly on oak. In these small traces lies a testament to endurance. What we call tricks were, in truth, a science born of respect. What we call craft was a philosophy, silent, unspoken, but carved into every mortise, every dovetail, every truss. To step into a medieval timber hall today is to enter a living memory. Light falls across beams blackened by centuries, yet still they hold. Touch the wood, and you touch the hand of a carpenter who shaped it by axe and chisel. Look upward, and you see not only timber, but trust. Trust in craft, in patience, in knowledge carried quietly through time. In an age that races forward with machines, these beams remind us of another truth. That true strength does not always roar with power, but whispers in endurance. That elegance does not always gleam with steel, but breathes in oak and ash. That legacy lies not only in names carved in chronicles, but in joints hidden deep in shadow still holding. The medieval carpenter was no hero of legend. His name was seldom sung. Yet without him, no bridge bore armies, no hall hosted councils, no spire reached heaven. His work stood silent, but essential, and it stands still.